Hello, everybody, and welcome to another week of Parsha with Parsha Becky. This week, we are in the middle of reading the fifth book of Torah. The fifth book of Torah, as you know, is called Devarim. And Devarim can mean words or things or speeches, because the whole book of Devarim consists of speeches about things that Moshe thinks we need to know before we're ready to go into the land of Israel. And this week's Parsha is called Ki Tetzei. Ki Tetzei means when you go. And Ki Tetzei is called that because the Parsha starts off with some rules about Ki Tetzei when you go to war. When you go to fight a war, the Parsha gives us a few rules that relate to fighting a war, including rules saying that even when we're fighting in a war, we have to keep our bodies and our spaces clean. We have to observe all rules of hygiene in our war camp and behave appropriately and keep our bodies clean, our hands clean, and our space clean. There's also rules about what you have to do if you want to marry somebody that you met while you were fighting at the war. And there's also rules that if you marry somebody, then for 1 year within you getting married, you are exempt from going to war. You don't have to go because you should be spending time as a couple for that first year. Obviously after that too, but especially in that first year, you deserve some alone time, some couple time, so you don't have to go fight in the war. There's also some other rules about getting married. Like if somebody is married to two people, which that's a lot of people to be married to, but let's say this person's married to two people, and let's say this person's making an even worse choice because they're playing favorites. They have a favorite wife and a less favorite wife. So that's also not so good to play favorites. But let's say this is happening and the person's oldest kid is the kid of their less favorite wife. Well then, because the Torah says always somebody's oldest kid gets, when at the end of their life, when their stuff is divided up between their kids, the oldest kid gets a little bit extra. And the Parsha says, you know what, even if you're playing favorites with your family members, which you shouldn't be, you're not allowed to play favorites with this rule. Because even if it's not your favorite kid or not your favorite wife's kid who's the oldest, it's the real oldest kid who gets a little bit extra of your stuff, and you can't mess with that rule. The Parsha also says, let's say two people get married, and then I guess they're not having such a good relationship because the guy says that his wife lied to him and tricked him when they got married and she wasn't honest with him and he wouldn't have married her if he'd known the truth. And she's like, what? No, I wasn't lying. Well, then they both have to bring proof. And if she brings proof that shows that she never tricked him, then he gets punished for trying to get her in trouble. And if he shows proof that she actually did trick him, then she gets punished for trying to trick him. We also learn that you should not be cheating on the person you're married to. That means you shouldn't be going on dates with someone else when you're already married to this person. The Parsha has some other interesting rules. Like if, let's say you find an animal wandering around lost, like an animal that's probably somebody's pet or somebody's farm animal, what's the obvious thing you have to do? You know, return it. But what if, Parsha loves our what if questions, what if you don't know who it belongs to? Well then, you have to take that animal home and you have to take good care of it while you're trying to find out who it belongs to. Maybe you should put up some wanted signs or look on the internet. But while you're waiting to find out who it belongs to, you have to take good care of that animal at your house until the owner comes to get it, and then you give it back to its owner. And the same rules are if you find any object that belongs to somebody and it's not yours, you have to either give it back to its owner, or if you don't know who the owner is, you have to take it home, take good care of it while you try to find out who owns it, and when you find the owner, you have to give it back to the owner. The Parsha also tells us that you're not allowed to try to trick people by pretending to be somebody that you're not. We also learn, here's a really interesting one. Let's say you're walking down the street one day and you get really hungry. You're feeling really hungry. You're like, man, when's snack time? It has been so long since I had lunch. I am really hungry. And then you see a bird's nest. Better yet, the bird's nest has eggs in it, and it's a bird's nest from a kosher bird, so the eggs are kosher. And you're like, you know, I could really do with some scrambled eggs right now. Well, guess what? The Parsha says, if the mother bird is there, you are not allowed to take those eggs. Can you imagine how mean it would be? How sad that mother bird would be to watch you taking her eggs when she can't even do anything to stop you? She's just a little bird. You're a person. That would be so mean. But the Parsha says if you're really hungry and you really want your scrambled eggs, what you can do is you can shoo away the mother bird, scare her off, and when the mother bird cannot see what's going on, then you can take the eggs that you need for your snack while the mother bird is not watching so that you're not making her all sad. The Parsha also tells us that you should not be charging interest to your fellow Jews. Interest is when you lend somebody money and you say, okay, but you have to give it back. Either give it back by Tuesday, or for every day that you haven't given it back, you have to give me back a little extra. I lent you $100, but if you don't pay me back by next week, you actually have to pay me like $150. That's not fair. You can only make people pay you back the amount that you lent them in the first place. And speaking of lending people money, the Parsha also has some interesting rules about how you can take collateral. Now, collateral is, let's say you're lending me $100, but you're like, you know what, Parsha Becky, $100 is a lot of money. I want to make sure that you pay me my money back. I can't charge you interest, so I need you to give me something of yours that you care about to hold on to, and you'll get it back when you pay me back. So it's like proof that I'm going to pay you back. So you are allowed to ask for collateral, but there are rules about how you do it. First of all, you can't go into somebody's house. You can't go into my house and say, okay, Parsha Becky, I'm lending you $100. Now let me take a look at your bookshelf and your walls and see what I want to take to hold on to until you give me my money back. You can't do that. You have to wait for me to bring something out to you, and maybe I'll say, okay, you can hold on to my Tanakh. I really like my Tanakh. I'm Parsha Becky. I love Torah. I love Tanakh. You can hold on to my Tanakh. And when I give you your $100 back, you'll give me back my Tanakh. You could do that, but there's still more rules. You can't take something that they need to support themselves. So if this was the only Tanakh I had, then how can I be Parsha Becky without a Tanakh? You can't say, hey, give me your Tanakh, because I know you care about that. I'll be like, hey, I need my Tanakh. How can I be Parsha Becky and make Parsha videos if I don't have a Tanakh to check? That's not fair. But since I do have more Tanakhs, I could give you my Tanakh, or one of my Tanakhs to hold on to. I love them a lot. It's still something that I want, that I'll pay you back your money to get my Tanakh back, but I can still support myself without it because I've got a spare. Whoa. I have a spare Tanakh, and I have a lot of books on my bookshelf. I will kiss this Tanakh as I put it back. I should look at the shelf while I put it back. There. Now all my books are in order. And you also, if it's something that they're going to be stressed about not having with them, I'm like, you know what, I really love my Tanakh though. Like, yes, I will pay you back. You'll get it back. But like, the idea of going to sleep at night without my Tanakh in my house is so upsetting. You actually have to give it back to them every night so that they can go to sleep without stress. And then you can come by, knock on their door the next morning, and I'll bring you back my Tanakh to hold on to until I pay you back. But you have to let me go to sleep every night with it in my house. So that's some interesting rules about lending people things. You also, here's a fun rule. Let's say, remember when you were hungry, you wanted your snack of scrambled eggs? Well, let's say that's not going to work. The mother bird won't leave, or you haven't seen any eggs. You're walking by, somebody's got like an apple tree in his backyard, or they've got a field of fruit, they've got, a berry picking field, and you're really hungry. Well, you can't gather up the apples from your friend's apple tree. That's not fair. That's his tree. That's stealing. But what you can do, you're allowed to take one apple to eat right away, not to save for later, but to eat it right away if you're hungry, even without asking. Just one the one that you're going to eat right now, you're allowed to take even without asking. The Parsha also tells us that if somebody works for you, you have to pay them fairly, pay them the money that they are supposed to get on time. You can't be late with paying them because that's not fair to them. They worked hard, they deserve to get paid. And also, if you take a case to court, the judge decides that you have to follow the rules the judge says. You have to follow the punishment the judge says and carry it out exactly the way the judge says. And speaking of punishing people, you only punish the person who did something wrong. You don't punish their parents, you don't punish their kids, you don't punish their dog, you don't punish anything but the person who did the thing wrong. Nobody else gets punished for someone else's bad choice, only the person who made the choice. The Parsha also reminds us, as a rule we learned a while back in the book of Vayikra, that when you gather food up from your field, you've got like a field of food that you grow. When you gather up from that field, if you forget anything, you come in, you're like, oh man, I forgot to do one bit. I dropped some stuff and I forgot about it. You are not allowed to go back for the food that you forgot, because guess what? It belongs to someone else. It belongs to the needy people. It belongs to people who don't have their own fields of food, or to people who don't have enough food to support themselves. And you have to leave it for them. And the Parsha reminds us, you are not allowed to oppress people, especially anyone, but especially the people who are the most vulnerable and the most needy in society, the people who don't have enough money to support themselves without help, people who have lost family members like widows and orphans. You have to be especially nice to them. People who converted to Judaism who might not have their own family in the Jewish community to help them and support them. You have to be extra nice, and you have to make sure not to oppress those people, not to trick those people or cheat those people or harm them or be unkind to them in any way. You have to be kind to all the members of your community, especially the people who might be in more need. The Parsha also has an interesting case that it talks about. It says, let's say there's a husband and wife who are married, but then they get divorced, and the wife marries someone else, and then she gets divorced from that someone else. Well, she's not allowed to remarry the first person she was married to. Even though if they just get divorced, they could get remarried. But once she's married someone else, that's it. You can't marry the person you were married to before that, even after she gets divorced. And another fun, interesting rule is, let's say there's a couple who gets married, and the husband passes away and they don't have any kids. They never had any kids. If he has a brother, then one of two things is going to have to happen. This is really strange. Either the widow, the wife of the guy who just passed away, either she has to marry her husband's brother, and their first kid is actually going to be named after the husband who passed away, or if they don't want to get married to each other, if either one of them doesn't want to get married to the other, then they're going to do something really funny. They're going to go up to the gate of the city, and they're going to stand in front of the gate with the judges, and they're going to announce, he's going to say, I don't want to marry her. She's going to say, hey, yeah, he just said he doesn't want to marry me. And she's going to take off his shoe, and then she's going to spit in his direction. Be careful, we don't want to get germs on people, but she's going to spit in his direction. She's going to say, he's not going to marry me. And then we're going to call him Shoeless Joe for a while. And at the end of the Parsha is one more really important thing that we learn. The Parsha says that we have to remember something that happened a long, long, long time back in the Torah, way back in the book of Shemot. And if you were studying Parsha back in the book of Shemot, you might remember this, how we were wandering through the desert, minding our own business, when all of a sudden, a really, really mean group of people came to Amalek, called Amalek. They snuck up behind us, and they attacked! And we didn't know they were coming, and they were just trying to hurt people, and it was so, so mean. It was terrible. And Moshe says, Hashem's not going to forget that happened, and we're not going to forget that happened. We better not forget, and we're going to keep an eye out. If there's anybody like that who wants to hurt people, it's our job to make sure that they are stopped and to make sure that they are punished. Just like the people of Amalek who attacked us got punished for what they did, Hashem's not going to forget, and we can't forget either. And that is the end of Parshat Ki Tetzei. I, of course, want to remind everybody, if you ever have questions about the Parsha or about Torah in general, I love questions. Please feel free to leave a comment with your questions, and I will be happy to answer any questions that I get in a future video. And I hope that you enjoy learning the Parsha with me. Shabbat Shalom.